Valery Bryusov in the mirror. I fell in love with mirrors when I was very young. As an infant, I wept and trembled, peeping into their translucent, truth-telling depths. In childhood, my favorite game was to walk through the house or garden, holding a mirror in front of me, and gazing into its chasm. Every step carried me over the brink, catching my breath from terror and vertigo. As a young girl, I started to deck my room with mirrors, large and small, some truthful and some distorting, some clear and some clouded. I formed the habit of spending entire hours and days in between these intersecting worlds, each of which mingled with the others, shimmering, vanishing, and reappearing. My sole passion became to yield my body to these soundless steps, these echoless perspectives, these separate universes, which interpenetrate our own and which exist, defying conscious thought. In the same time and place as this world, this inside-out reality separated from ours by a smooth surface of glass, somehow inaccessible to touch, drew me and lured me to itself like a creepy, like a mystery. Even the shade that always appeared before me whenever I approached a mirror, queerly doubting my being, attracted me. I tried to guess how this other woman might differ from me, how my right hand could become her left, and how all the fingers on that hand could be reversed. Although one of them wore my wedding ring, my thoughts became tangled when I tried to understand and solve this riddle. In this world, where everything can be touched, where voices can be heard, I lived the real me in that reflected world which can only be contemplated. She lived. The shade, she was almost the same as me, and not me at all. She repeated all my gestures, and not one of them was the same as my own. She, the other, knew what I could not fathom. She possessed a secret hidden forever from my reason. I noticed, however, that every mirror has its own separate and unique world. Try pulling two mirrors in the same place side by side, and two different worlds will appear. And in these different worlds, confronting me, different shades appeared, all resembling me, but never identical with each other. In my little hand mirror lived a naive, bright-eyed young girl who reminded me of my own early youth. In my round boudoir glass lurked a woman steeped in every kind of sensuality. She was a shameless, liberated, beautiful, bold. In the square mirror set in my wardrobe door, there flourished a strict, powerful, chilly figure with an inflexible stare. I knew still other doubles. In my pier glass, in the three panels of my gilded golden mirror, in my oak-framed pendant, in the little glass I wore from my neck, and in many, many more of the mirrors I kept. I gave all these things hidden in my mirror both a chance to live and a purpose in living. The strange conditions of their world forced them to wear the appearance of whoever stood before the glass. slightest borrowed exterior. They kept their individuality. There were mirror worlds that I loved, and there were some that I hated. I loved to project myself into some for hours on end, losing myself in enticing spaces. Others I avoided. Secretly, I did not love all my doubles. I knew that all of them were hostile towards me, if only because they were forced to don my hated appearance. But I pitied several of these mirror women, forgave them their hatred, and treated them almost as friends. There were others for whom I had contempt. I liked to laugh at their hopeless fury. I taunted them with my independence and, and tortured them with my power over them. On the other hand, there were some I feared who were too powerful and who dared in their turn to laugh at me, who tried to command me. I hurried to dispose of the mirrors where these women lived. I did not look into those mirrors. I hid them, gave them away, even smashed them. But each time I broke a mirror, I sobbed helplessly for whole days afterwards, realizing I had destroyed a whole universe, and the reproachful faces of a perished world gaze at me reprovingly from the shards. The mirror was too faithful for me. I bought one at some sale or other. It was a large cheval glass swinging on hinges. The unusual clarity of its reflection impressed me. The ghostly reality within was transformed by the slightest tilt of the glass. Yet it was extremely lifelike and distinct. When I studied the cheval glass at the auction, the woman who reflected me stared into my eyes with a kind of arrogant challenge. I did not want to submit to her, to betray that she frightened me. I purchased a glass and ordered it to be placed in my boudoir. Once I was alone in my room, I immediately approached the new mirror and fixed my eyes on the rival. But she did the same. Standing opposite each other, we began to pierce each other with our stares. Like two snakes, I was reflected in the pupils of her eyes, and she in mine. My heart stopped beating, and my head spun from the fixed glare. But by an effort of will, I finally tore my gaze away from those strange eyes and kicked the mirror so that it swung to and fro, compassionately rocking the phantom of my rival. I left the room. Our struggle began from that moment. On the evening of the first day we met, I lacked the courage to go near my new glass. I went to the theater with my husband, laughed too loudly, and pretended to be cheerful. The following day, in the clear light of a September morning, I boldly entered my boudoir alone and deliberately sat down directly opposite of the mirror. In the same instant, she, the other, also entered by the same door, came towards me, crossed the room, and sat down facing me. Our eyes met. I read hatred for me in her eyes. She read the same in mine. Our second duel had begun. A duel fought with the eyes alone. Two unremitting stares, commanding, threatening, hypnotizing. Each of us trying to control The rival's will to break her resistance, to force her to submit to the other's desires. What a terrible sight. We must have been two women sitting and moving opposite each other, linked by a magical influence of their stares, almost fainting from the mental strain. Suddenly, I was called away. The spell was broken. I rose and went out. After this, our duels became a daily affair. I understand that this adventuress had deliberately invaded my house in order to destroy me and seize my place in the world. Yet I lacked the strength to refuse our struggle. Some secret rupture lay in the rivalry. In the very possibility of defeat, there lurked a kind of sweet seduction. Sometimes for whole days I forced myself not to approach the shallow glass, occupying myself with tasks or amusement. But at the bottom of my soul, the memory of my rival always lurked, waiting patiently and confidently for me to return. I would come and she would appear before me, more effulgent than before, to sink her victorious gaze into me and pin me to my place before her. My heart would stop beating, and, helplessly furious, I would submit to the power of her gaze. Sometimes, when away from her, I would consider my home, traveling to another town and hiding there from my enemy. But I would immediately realize that this was impossible. It would change nothing. I would still return here to this room, to my mirror, submitting to the pull of her hateful will. Sometimes I wanted to strike the glass, smash it into fragments, and destroy this unknown world, which threatened mine, and the sometimes in a frenzy, and sometimes in a frenzy, I even flung myself on the mirror with some heavy thing in my hand, but my rival's scornful sneer would restrain me. Victory attained at this price. Victory attained at that price would have approved her superiority and my defeat. And our struggle went on and on. It had to end in it had to end in victory for one of us. I soon felt, however, that my rival was stronger than me. Each time we met, more and more power over me was concentrated in her stare. Little by little, I lost the ability to let a day go by without revisiting her. She ordered me to spend several hours a day seated before her. She ruled my will as a memoress controls the will of a slave walker. She commanded my life as a ruler commands its slaves. I began to do everything she demanded. I became an automaton. Obeying her silent commands, I knew that she was leading me to my room deliberately, carefully, but inflexibly, and even then I did not resist. I had guessed her secret plan to hurl me into the mirror world, and herself escape into our world. But I no longer had the strength to interfere with her plans. My husband, my family, seeing that I was spending whole hours, days and nights in front of the mirror, thought that I had lost my wits and wished to send me for treatment. I did not dare to be open with them. I was forbidden to tell them all the terrible truth, all the horrors to which I was doomed. The day of my defeat was a day in December, before the holidays. I remembered every detail of it clearly and distinctly. Nothing is confused in my recollections. As usual, I went into my boudoir early at the very beginning of the winter twilight. I placed a soft back in his armchair before the mirror, sat down, and yielded myself to her. She came at my pillow, without delaying, also to the upbeat chair, also sat down, and sank her gaze into me. Dark forebodings thrilled with my soul, but I had no power to lower my eyes, and was forced to submit to my rival's insolent gaze. Hours went by, shadows clustered, neither of us lighted the lamp. The glass gleamed faintly in the darkness. Her features were barely visible, but self-assured eyes gazed with all their former strength. I felt neither malice nor dread, as on other days, but only the unappeasable sorrow and bitterness of knowing that I was in another's power. Times went by, and I floated with it in infinitude, in a black expanse of powerlessness and lack of violation. Suddenly she, her reflection, rose from her chair. I trembled all over from the insult, but some unconquerable exterior pressure forced me to stand also. The woman in the mirror took a step forward. So did I. The woman in the mirror stretched out her hands. So did I. Constantly staring straight at me with her hypnotic and commanding eyes. She continued moving forward, and I came to meet her, and strangely, despite all the horrors of my position, despite all my hatred for my rival, somewhere in the depths of my soul there fluttered a bitter comfort, a secret joy at entering, at last, the mysterious world into which I had been gazing since childhood, and which had remained close to me until now. Momentarily, I almost forgot who was calling whom, whether she was drawn to me or I to her, whether she coveted my place or whether I had dreamt up this entire struggle in order to take hers. But when, as I stepped forward, my hands touched hers through the glass, I grew numb with revulsion. She masterfully seized me by both hands and wrenched me toward her. My arms plunged into the mirror as if into fiery, freezing water. The cold of the glass sank agonizingly into my body, as if every atom of my being was turning inside out. An instant later, I was face to face with my rival. I saw her eyes directly before my own. I melted into her, and in a natural kiss, everything was extinguished in deadly, unimaginable suffering. And when I recovered from my faint, I saw before me my employer as I looked out from the mirror. My rival was standing in front of me, laughing, and oh, the cruelty of it, I, who was dying from torture and humiliation, I had to laugh as well, repeating each of her grimaces in excellent, joyful laughter. And before I could even grasp my position, my rival abruptly turned, made for the door, and disappeared from my sight. I was plunged without warning into numbness, into non-being. From that moment, my life as a reflection began. A strange, half-conscious, but secretly pleasurable life. There were many of us in that mirror, dark souls, slumbering minds. Although we could not speak to each other, we sensed another's nearness. We loved each other. We saw nothing, heard dimly, and our existence resembled the exhaustion of asphyxiation. Only when a being from the world of people approached the mirror could we suddenly assume meanings. could we, suddenly assuming his appearance, look into that world? Distinguished voices, breath of full lungs. I think the dead may exist like this, in unclear consciousness of their own. I, dimly recalling their past and tormented with longing to be embodied, concealing, nursing, and cherishing hopes of freedom, of finding a new body, of escaping into the world of constancy and stability. At first, I felt utterly miserable in my new circumstances. I understood nothing and could do nothing. Submissively and unthinkably, I assumed my rival's image when she drew close to the mirror and began teasing me. And she did this quite often. It gave her great pleasure to parade her liveliness, her psychiality before me. She sat down, forcing me to sit too. She stood up, joining me when she saw me stand also. Waved her hands and danced, forcing me to repeat all of her movements. She roared with laughter to make me laugh too. She shrieked insults in my face, and I could not reply to her. She threatened me with her fist and sneered at the feeble force counter gesture I made. And then suddenly, with one blow, he swung the mirror around on its axis, and with a stroke, plugged me into utter void. However, little by little, her insults and humiliations rose my consciousness within me. I realized that my rival was now living my life, wearing my clothes, posing as a husband's wife, taking my place in society, hatred, and the desire for vengeance began growing in my soul like two fiery flowers. I started cursing myself bitterly and for the weakness or culpable curiosity that allowed me to be vanquished. I became convinced that this adventuress would never have triumphed over me if I had not eaten her schemes myself. And now accustomed somewhat to the conditions of my new existence, I decided to start the same struggle with her that she had waged against me. If she, a mere shade, had succeeded in taking the place of a real woman, then surely I, a human being, only temporarily reduced to a shade, would be stronger than a ghost. I began in a very small way. At first I pretended that the gifts of my rival were tormenting me more insufferably than ever. I deliberately afforded her all the pleasure of victory. I played on her secret instinct for torture by shaming exhaustion and despair. She fell for this lure. She relished playing with me. She exhausted her fancy by thinking up new torments. She invented thousands of cunning ways to remind me that I was only a reflection and that I had no life of my own. She would play the piano for me, torturing me with the deafness of my world. She would sit before the mirror and swallow my favorite liquors, mouthful by mouthful, forcing me to mind drinking them too. Finally, she would bring men that I hated into repertoire, allow them to kiss her body for my eyes, letting them think that they were kissing me, and afterwards, when left alone with me, she guffawed triumphantly and gloatingly. But this guffaw no longer stung me. I found pleasure in its bitterness. I was waiting for my revenge, noticed by her, and she continued continued to insult me, I trained my rival to look me in the eye. I gradually mastered her with my gaze. Soon, by my own will, I could force her to raise or lower her eyelids, or to make some facial movements. I had begun, I had already begun to rejoice, although I concealed my feelings under a mask of pain. My willpower was increasing, and I was bold enough to order my enemy. Today, you will do such and such. Today, you will go to such and such place. Tomorrow, you will come to me at such and such time. And she obeyed me. I trapped her soul, and it web of wish. Trapped her soul, and it web of my wishes. I drove a firm hand, and which I directed her will. I exulted secretly, counting my victories. With one, as she was laughing, she spied the tortoise smile on my lips, which I was unable to hide. Was already too late. She fled raging from the room, but as I fell to the sleep of my non-existence, I knew that she would return, that she was meant to me, and the ecstasy of maturity hovered over my involuntary helplessness, piercing the gloom of my death-like trance. With its rainbow-colored band, she did return. She came to me in rage and terror, shouted at me, threatened me, but I gave her orders, and she was obliged to fulfill them. A game of cat and mouse began. At any moment, I could hurl her back into the real world of sound and solid things. She knew that this was my intention, and her weariness doubled her suffering. But I took my time. It was pleasant to linger and nod being a little longer. I was sweet to savor my power at last. And surely this was strange. Pity for my rival, for my enemy, for my torturer, woke within me. There was, after all, something of her. There was, after all, something of me in her. I dreaded ripping her out of reality and transforming her again into a ghost. I wanted her courage and hesitated. I procrastinated from day to day. I myself did not know what I desired and what I feared. Suddenly, on a great spring day, men carrying boards and axes came into my boudoir. I was not alert at the time. I was lying in a sensuous trance. But even without seeing, I understood that they were there. Men began busying themselves around the mirror, which contained my universe. And one after another, the shades dwelling there with me woke and donned their ghostly flesh and reflections. A critical fear shook my drowsy spirit, anticipating the horror to come, anticipating my final extinction. I mustered all my strength of will, the effort it cost me to resist a nightmare, bursting free of its suffocating bonds into reality. I concentrated all my forces on summoning her, my rival. Come here. I hypnotized her. I magnetized her with all the power of my half-sleeping will. There was so little time. The mirror was already swaying. They were already preparing to box it up in a wooden coffin and carry it away, where I did not know. Although, with a death rattle, I called her again and again. Come. And suddenly I sensed the return of life. She, my enemy, had opened the door, and pale, half dead, was approaching me on my summons, with dragging steps if one walked to the scaffold. My eyes met hers. I transfixed her gaze with my own, and I knew then instantly that I had conquered. Straight away, I compelled her to send the man out of the room, and she submitted without even attempting to resist. We were alone again. I could not delay any longer. I pitilessly ordered her to come closer. Her lips parted with a groan of agony. Her eyes widened as if seeing a ghost. But she came swaying, tottering. She came. I also walked towards her, my lips twisted in triumph, my eyes wide with joy. I staggered with the darkness of ecstasy. Our hand touched once more. Our lips again grew close, and we plunged one into another, tortured by the inexpressibly painful return of flesh. An instant later, I was standing before a mirror, my lungs filled with air, and with a joyful and victorious shriek, I collapsed on the spot in front of the shower glass, felled by exhaustion. My husband and servants ran to my side. I was barely able to ask for my earlier orders to be fulfilled, that they should take the mirror out of the house directly. Then I fainted and put me to bed and called the doctor. After all I had endured, I suffered a nervous fever. My relatives had already long considered me unwell, even abnormal. In the first flash of victory, I abandoned my guard and told them everything that had happened. My tale confirmed their suspicions. I was transferred to a psychiatric clinic where I still am. My entire being, I conceded, is still badly shaken. I do not wish to remain here. I long to return to the joys of life, to all the innumerable pleasures that a living person can enjoy. I was deprived of them for too long. I have my doubts about my triumphs. None whatsoever. I know that I am myself. And all the same, when I begin to think about the other trapped in my mirror, I begin to be seized by a strange hesitation. What if the real I is there? Then I, myself, the I who thinks this, the I who writes this, is a shade, a ghost, a reflection. The mirror, the thoughts, and the feelings of hers, the other me, the real one, have only been poured into me, and in reality I have been abandoned and not being the depths of a mirror. I suffer, I perish, I am dying. I know, I am almost sure, that this isn't true, but in order to banish the last clouds of doubt, I must once again, one last time, see that mirror. I must look into one more time, in order to be convinced that Lucifer is there, my enemy, who acted my part for several months. I will see her, and all the conflicted in my soul, and all the conflict in my soul will disappear, and I shall once more be carefree, gay, and happy. Where is that mirror? Where can I find it? I must look into one last time. I must.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, then please leave a comment and a like, and subscribe. If you'd like to support the channel, then consider becoming a patron. I have a $1 tier and a $3 tier. $1 tier, you get your name that appears at the beginning and end of each video. Your name also goes into the description of the video. $3 tier, same thing as $1 tier, but I'll also shout out your name, and I'll put in the description, along with your name, one link of your choice to one of your social medias. If you'd like to support the channel more or whatever, buy some merch. I have a Streamlabs merch shop. You can see the link at the top here. Again, the link will be in the description. I have t-shirts, mugs, and a couple of other things you can check out. I even have a Redbubble. I have like a sticker and a clock and a couple of things there as well on Redbubble. If you would like to commission me to draw your original character, I have a Fiverr starting at $10, and t-shirt artwork and artwork in that is done by Johnny Bush, and the music is done by Roman Sermon. The woman wearing the shirt here is Shelly, Roman's wife. Thank you for watching. I hope you all had a wonderful day, night, and до свидания.